Hello everyone. Thank you for coming 文明客厅读书会. Today we'll continue to read Robert Spalding's book, Stealth War: How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept, by Robert Spalding, Brigadier General. Robert Spalding retired from the U.S. Air Force as a Brigadier General after more than 26 years of service. He completed his career as the Senior Director for the Strategic Planning to the President at the National Security Council and was the Chief Architect for the National Security Strategy. He is a former China strategist for the Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff and Joint Staff at the Pentagon, as well as a senior defense official and a defense attaché to China. He earned his doctorate in economics and mathematics from the University of Missouri and is fluent in Mandarin. Chapter 6: Modern Warfare 5.0: The 5G Future. In 2014, Deputy Secretary of Defense Robert Work was put in charge of the Defense Innovation Initiative. This project was heralded as the third offset strategy, a phrase that draws on two of the most successful plans in U.S. military history. The first offset was Eisenhower's use of nuclear deterrence to counteract the Soviet Union's lead in conventional arms. The second offset, started by Defense Secretary Harold Brown and Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering William Perry in the Carter administration and continued by Reagan, called for investment in superior technologies such as stealth aircraft, precision-guided missiles, and satellite spying. It is worth mentioning that these weapons were built using research and design breakthroughs of the 1960s and 1970s that were funded by the Pentagon. Back then, about 2% of America's GDP was spent on R&D. Today, we spend about 0.7%. Taken together, the first two offsets contributed to the fall of the Soviet Empire. The third offset, an ambitious department-wide effort to identify and invest in innovative ways to sustain and advance America's military dominance for the 21st century. According to the Obama administration Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, was going to leverage American technology innovation. It was not necessary, Hagel added, because where we spent over a decade focusing on girdling stability operations, countries like Russia and China have been heavily investing in military modernization programs to blur our military technological edge. When Robert Work started trying to implement the Defense Innovation Initiative, he and Hagel's replacement, Ash Carter, were in for a rude awakening. The Pentagon assumed that it would work with tech companies and share resources to build new cutting-edge weapon systems. But China had already thoroughly infiltrated the tech space with investment and scientists. We failed to realize that the Chinese were involved in all those commercial research partnerships. There were pacts with Google and partnership with Apple. Chinese scientists often work side by side with our scientists, even on research and development for the U.S. military. With these arrangements, any work performed on behalf of the U.S. military was likely going to be done by or shared with Chinese scientists. In other words, the introduction of the Internet inexorably linked economic security with our national security. We could no longer think about the Silicon Valley's growth model as independent of our national security. In raising the alarm from inside government, I learned firsthand how firmly China's strategy was enabled by our own fixed notions of the separation of business and government, the separation of economic and national security. I also learned personally how hard the industry lobby would fight to defend its ability to maintain this dangerous status quo. More on that later. As for the startup market, where cutting-edge applications and innovation flourish, China remained focused on looking up early-stage tech deals too. In 2015, Chinese investors participated in 271 deals with total deal value of $11.5 billion, according to a report issued by the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, which noted this represented almost 16% of the value of all technology deals in this year, which the total is $72 billion. The Air Force state-of-the-art stealth bomber, the F-35, a highly computerized machine built with systems accessible from the ground, is a victim of China's infiltration of U.S. technology. Some of the parts used to build F-35s are actually manufactured in China. In this instance, the supply chain becomes a huge vulnerability, and not just the secrets the manufacturers are given access to are at risk. The plane itself is. Army intelligence has concluded that the Chinese stole all the plans for the F-35. Now you have to wonder about sabotaged parts that might destroy the machine, or worse, the idea that components contain backdoor access to the plane's operating system. In this scenario, it is conceivable that the plane could be taken down or hacked. We might lose command and control of our own assets. So the United States has the most versatile and agile stealth flying machine in the world, and we can trust it because we don't have the secure digital pipes we need to ensure that the correct data flows in safely, dependably, without exposure to hacking. Which brings me to the matter of 5G, the groundbreaking fifth-generation modern communication paradigm. The 5G platform is not like 2G or 3G or even 4G, not even close. It is not just a mobile phone network built to connect phone calls, email, and text messages. Think of it as the next generation of the Internet, built for machines. It is, not to put too fine a point of it, 100 times faster than 4G. That means there will be almost no latency, no delay between sending and receiving data on 5G. So 5G is a much faster, more direct, more precise platform that allows nearly instantaneously communication between people, between machines, and between people and machines. That speed and precision mean 5G will transform our society in ways that are hard to fathom. It is strategists' job, however, to look toward the future and explore possible outcomes. It is clear that technological advances will accelerate well beyond the current pace, as data will be able to flow from apps and sensors, feeding machine learning and artificial intelligence engines. Accentuating the positive, it is easy to imagine 5G improving many facets of modern life. Surgeries might be able to perform remotely by doctor or even by machines, and machines era in need of brake pads, home finances in need of cleaning, air conditioners in need of filters, lamps in need of light bulbs, will be able to self-regulate and notify owners or managers when they need servicing. Furthermore, dangerous jobs such as unsafe mining operations, deep-sea sewerage, or the sterilization of clinics during the Ebola outbreak might be done using remote robots. But for all the promises of this new completely wireless world, and yes, even the once vital transcontinental filter optic lines lining on the ocean floor may be rendered obsolete by the power of 5G, the new network will bring new vulnerabilities. new security worries, and new national concerns. Defending against these security threats should fall, at least in part, to the military. But ironically, the military needs to be defended too. If the communications system used by our national defenses is penetrated, our nation's safety will be compromised. When I joined the National Security Council in May 2017, I had two goals in mind: educate the other members of the NSC on China's not-so-covert campaign for global dominance, and ensure the security of the 5G network not only within U.S. borders for our allies as well. Given decades of Chinese digital infiltration and IP self, there was little doubt that the CCP would put a premium on controlling 5G networks. China's biggest telecom companies, Huawei and ZTE, began aggressively offering to build 5G networks for other nations, and that set off alarm bells in my head. If a Chinese telecom builds and controls a nation's 5G network, there will be no checks and balances to keep the Chinese company from stealing and mining all the data on that network. All the academic papers and research, all engineering and business plans, all the photos, emails, and text messages. Everything will be fair game to a country that doesn't believe in fair games. Furthermore, controlling another nation's network will allow the CCP to weaponize the technology that is managed by the network. What does that mean? Think of a hostile force taking over a self-driving car or bus and directing it to crash into a crowded sidewalk. Think of a flock of drones moving into the flight path of an airplane. Think of every digitally controlled furnace shutting down during a sub-zero cold spell. The blend of technologies and spectrums behind 5G will allow for about 3 million connected devices per square mile. This is an exponential upgrade from 4G, which enables about 10,000 connections per square mile. That means that in a stadium hosting an NFL football game, every smartphone owner fan in attendance will have a network connection. But so will any drones, sensors, or robots in or near the stadium, including the cars in the parking lot. The capacity for communication offered by 5G is stunning. It is much better to think of 5G as a network built for machines, since most of the network traffic will eventually be machine to machine. This will allow for massive data production, which will feed machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms, which in turn will continue improving the technology in a giant information feedback loop. The societal implications of 5G on how we live and how we work are truly mind-boggling. And so is the capacity to abuse that power. Let's be totally clear. Anything connected to an unsecured 5G network will be a potential weapon that can be used to gain geopolitical influence and control. If China were to control a 5G network, it would be able to weaponize the technology within entire cities or entire countries served by that network and hold that city or state at its mercy. The NSC is run by the National Security Advisor, who has an office in the West Wing of the White House. Most of his staff, the council, operates out of the old executive office, now known as the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, just west of the White House. The council, as you would imagine, is filled with experts. Some are Middle East experts, some are Russian experts, some are Europe experts, some are nuclear weapon experts. Naturally, every expert thinks his area of focus is of paramount importance, myself included. But if the NSC is concerned with clear and present danger, which is part of its mandate, I knew to my core that the biggest threat to national security wasn't ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and radical Islam, or Vladimir Putin. It was and is China. And nothing would be more damaging than the CCP's potential global dominance of 5G networks. I intended to make this clear to the entire NSC. Unfortunately, because of internal politics, I didn't have the clout to push my understanding of China's strategy to the forefront of the NSC. So I crafted a way to build awareness of China's threat to security indirectly. I organized a series of open forums I called Winning Without War and invited the entire NSC to attend. I booked speakers to discuss economic warfare, political warfare, information warfare, and legal warfare, different ways that you can defeat an opponent without actually firing a shot. The forums each consisted of a 45-minute presentation, a 20-minute Q&A, and then a 45 minutes free-for-all discussion. For the first meeting, I asked James Marvellan, a longtime China hand and the co-author of 2013's Chinese Industrial Espionage, to talk. The effect was electric, total engagement. Many of the Trump administration who were interested in China policy were there. By the end of the meeting, things got really heated. At one point, a China watcher basically called a military policy expert a panda hugger, and all hell broke loose. This was not business as usual at NSC. To keep the peace, I got up and gave the last word. I thanked everyone for attending and said I had two observations. The first thing that we need to do is realize that the enemy is not in this room, it's 6,000 miles away. And the second thing is that the truth is we've all been alcoholics, essentially getting drunk on China. What we are going to do about it. The talks were all attended and extremely influential. I believe they led to an invitation to contribute to the 2018 National Security Strategy and help lay out our China policy and our 5G policy. I began drafting a memo about the future of 5G in the United States. In it, I stated that the creation of the network was a national security issue as opposed to a business or technology issue. The paper asserted that protecting the security of our 5G network was critical to stopping Chinese influence and hostile actions. And because that was critical to maintain our level of security and freedom, the effort should be led by the U.S. government. The document outlined a plan to transition to a wholesale model for wireless communications. The idea was that the United States would share the military spectrum with a private company that would construct and maintain a secure 5G network, and then lease out bandwidth to retail providers. By providing a secure option in which communications would be encrypted and protected, and allowing telecoms to procure and provide access to the network, we would ensure the integrity of our information and communications infrastructure and begin to break China's telecommunication market's dominance. In my proposal, I compare a government build-out of 5G to Eisenhower's National Highway Plan, a giant infrastructure plan that sought to ensure the swift movement of military troops, hardware, and auxiliary support through the country. Yes, it opened up the nation and jump-started the long-distance trunking industry. But a multi-billion-dollar highway project was rooted in infrastructure and security. The 5G platform is no different. It is about building a highway to an information highway. Although my analogy was rooted in history, the proposal was greeted as a radical idea in many quarters. Telecommunications in America has been owned and operated by the private sector for more than 100 years. The multi-billion-dollar industry regarded the idea of government involvement other than the breakup of AT&T monopoly in the 1970s, and antithetical to free trade and therefore inconceivable. The idea that a government won't be overstepping its bounds, however, flies in the face of precedent and reality. The government of the United States controls or regulates many markets of national importance. Airlines are subject to the rules and requirements of the Federal Aviation Administration, which oversees the skies of America. The Nuclear Regulative Commission licenses and inspects reactors. The Food and Drug Administration dictates which drug can and cannot be sold. The federal government even controls the price of milk. Airlines, nuclear power, drugs, and food. Those are 4 vital industries with government regulations that I was able to name off the top of my head. I'm sure there are plenty of others. So the argument that a government would be over-regulating by managing or overseeing 5G to ensure national security and safety is entirely indigenous. That's precisely what a government should do, and I say that as someone with libertarian leanings. My proposal was leaked to the press. I have no idea who was behind the disclosure, but it sets off a firestorm of criticism. Sources have told me that representatives of a large American telecom put pressure on the administration to get rid of me. Apparently, those sources were correct. That same week, I received word that my detail was ended. That was the system's ways of saying I was being removed, in effect fired, from my position at NSC. My bid to awaken the NSC and to ensure that America can operate safely and securely in the future was over. On one level, I was okay with leaving the NSC. I had succeeded in getting a 5G declaration placed in the 2018 National Security Strategy document signed by President Trump. We will improve America's digital infrastructure by deploying a secure 5G internet capacity nationwide. I also felt that I had succeeded in awakening the NSC to China's stealth war. My goal was to get people to understand the problem, because there is the first step toward formulating good policy. But on another level, nobody liked being forced out of a job. That was frustrating. The scariest, most disheartening thing of all, however, was the reality, actually, that after more than 20 years serving my country, I was bounced, in part, so that corporations could sacrifice long-term national security for quick and easy short-term profits. This has become the American way. It has to change now.